will now call back to order the regular meeting of the Lake Forest School District 67 Board of Education for June 29th, 2021. May I have a roll call, please, Julia?
Mrs. Levert.
Here.
Ms. Helms. Here. Mrs. Sands.
Here.
Mr. Carrar.
Here.
Mrs. Bernal.
Here.
Mr. England.
Here.
Mr. Chen. We have a quorum.
Good evening. Thank you to everyone that is here in person tonight, watching this live, or will be tuning in over the next few days. This is our first regular meeting back in the boardroom in quite some time, and it feels great to be back. At tonight's meeting, we'll get an update from Interim Superintendent Collins on a recommendation for a new principal at Cherokee Elementary, including an update on the process that Connie and her team went through to engage the community. I'd like to thank all the parents, teachers, and staff that participated in the search. In addition to taking action on a new principal for Cherokee, tonight's meeting is also important for another change in leadership. Tonight's meeting will be Dr. Collins' last meeting as our interim superintendent. Back when we were interviewing candidates for interim superintendent, someone said about Connie, she checks things off her list. She gets things done. Clearly, that person knew Connie well. When she started as interim superintendent in April, the board asked Connie to focus on 3 goals: implement a supervised remote program in the spring, develop a robust summer school program that addresses learning loss, and build a plan for a return to full 5-day-a-week in-person learning for the fall. Check, check, and check. In a short time, she's supported district administrators who have delivered against these goals as a team. She's gotten to know our kids, regularly visiting classrooms across all of our schools. Thank you, Connie, for your impactful and steady leadership. Starting this Thursday, July 1st, we're starting the next chapter for District 67 and District 115 as we welcome our new superintendent, Dr. Matt Montgomery. Over the summer, Matt will be working with the board to refine goals for the district for the upcoming year, optimize our shared services model, and further improve community engagement and communication. District 67 has a lot to look forward to. Before turning it over to Connie for the superintendent's report, on behalf of the board and community, I did have one small gesture of appreciation. Connie, thank you for everything that you've done with Lake Forest. Now, I will turn it over to the superintendent. Connie?
Good evening to everyone. It's great to be here, and we will get started with the interim superintendent's report. Tonight's report will cover district COVID-19 update, summer school Mandarin program in the fall, medically necessitated remote learning, Cherokee principal search. COVID-19 update. I'm going to ask Michelle Shen if she would share this information.
Actually just looked at these numbers. They might be a little bit lower, but things in Lake County and in 60045 tend to look great, at least at this point. It's actually in 60045, as I just checked, under 1, so 0.68 per 100,000, and Lake County's at 1.14 per 100,000. And what's even better news too, with all of our school-age children, all of the four age ranges that they have, the highest number right now is a 2.42 incidence rates, and that's in our children under 5 and younger. Everybody else is lower, and I think our 11 to 13 group is at 0, which is pretty good. Just an update of some of the things that we did toward the end of the school year. We held 3 vaccine clinics at Deer Path Middle School for our 11 to 13-year-olds, as well as our second dose of the Moderna for our community members, and really had a great partnership with the City of Lake Forest and Doctors Test Centers. A total of 909 doses were given to people 12 years of age and up. Sorry, not 11-year-olds, our 12-year-old and up. And a special thanks to our community members, Nicole Phelan and Mary Beth O'Shea for their coordination and their tenacity in helping anybody and everybody that needed to be and wanted to be vaccinated in Lake Forest and the surrounding communities to get hooked up in the state of Illinois, especially when it was really challenging to get appointments and find out where to go. So thank you to them. I know the Phase 5, there have been a lot of questions about masking now that people are vaccinated and how we're going to move forward with that. I think at this point, we still don't have any guidance for the fall from IDPH or from the health departments. I think there are still a number of moving pieces with the variant and vaccinations and whatnot. But we're just following at this point Phase 5 mask direction for the district administrative settings and board meetings. And as I'm sure many of you have read, for businesses and venues where everyone present is fully vaccinated, the state does not require face coverings and social distancing in outdoor and indoor settings, and businesses and municipalities are permitted to continue that requirement if they choose to do so as they deem appropriate. So until we get further guidance, we at this point are following the IDPH and Lake County requirements. When in school settings, we are required to mask at this time. And this came from Phase 5. All persons, including students, teachers, school nurses, other health personnel, administrative, secretarial, and you can read through that, that serve students in pre-kindergarten through grade 12 must wear a mask at all times when in school or in transit to school, be it buses, unless an exemption applies. We did get a little bit of a reprieve with the June 7th updates with the FAQs where outside, we are no longer required to wear masks, staff or students. So the kids in summer school have been able to start summer school and at least go outside without having to wear masks in the unbearable heat that we've had. Well, I wished for rain. I got a lot of rain, and now I wish for just a combination. But at this point, we're kind of status quo until we get more guidance from the health department. Am I doing summer school? Is this part of it? I'm happy to. I'm on a roll. Summer school, we are 100% in person. All of our students are attending summer school at Sheridan. It's very busy. For those of you that have not been to Sheridan, it's our smallest building, but we find ways to get lots of kids in and out in a orderly manner. We have continued the use of the health screener, masks worn indoors on school grounds, and as I said, students and staff no longer outside. We do have individuals who are fully vaccinated may resume sports-related activities without wearing masks or maintaining physical distance. And it depends on if it's indoor or outdoor, whether you're vaccinated or not. But for the most part, you're allowed to participate outdoors without masks, and indoors, if you're vaccinated without masks, it's a little bit tricky. We have been participating mostly in summer school. This year, the health department allowed any of the schools in Lake County to apply for participation in a modified quarantine pilot. What this meant is that as part of this pilot, we are no longer required to exclude students. Well, it reduces the close contact to 3 to 6 feet instead of 6 feet, so it allowed us to reduce the social distancing at summer school. And the health department is really, I think, looking for some information about whether or not they can reduce that going into the school year. So several schools, not just elementary, but high school across the county have been participating in that. The other piece of that is we're not required to quarantine. If you meet that definition, you are not a close contact. If you're under 3 feet next to that individual, you would quarantine, but we were not quarantining any close contacts, and we haven't had any positive cases, so it's been kind of a quiet, knock on wood. We still have a few more days, so I'm just going to stop talking about that. If students are exempted from quarantine, they needed to follow the guidance that they get tested 5 to 7 days after the date of exposure, either through school testing or a designated location, and then if students did not elect to get tested, they would be out the 10 quarantine days the health department requires for close contacts at this point. So looking forward to some guidance coming from the pilot from the health department to help us reduce some of our requirements for kids, especially our little guys. That's it.
Thank you, Michelle.
They are using the same data system they use throughout the year with RedCap and communication with our nurses, so I'm assuming they're going to use the same database to inform decision-making from those pilot schools, probably culling the data from those particular sites out of RedCap. Oh, good question. They opened it to the first round, I want to say probably close to 22 or 23, and then there were an additional three or four added to that. So around 25, 26 schools. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Michelle. Summer School, 2021. I've heard from my peers in other school districts and read in the national media that summer school attendance is down this year. This is absolutely not the case in District 67. We are currently serving about 300 students in our June session. In years past, participation has hovered around 150 students. Our 2021 summer school program is designed to provide targeted instruction to bridge learning gaps due to the pandemic or just to keep existing skills fresh. For our June session, students have signed up for English language arts and math. Current student data and levels of performance from the 2020-2021 school year guide differentiated instruction. The August session will offer continued study in English and math, plus enrichment opportunities in STEM, executive function, and a special class for students transitioning to 5th grade in the middle school. Our District 67 summer school principal, Mrs. Megan Eigenrock, is doing a fantastic job of managing the program, and we are hearing very positive feedback from our district families. Many are grateful for bus transportation being provided to district families free of charge this year. Our district Mandarin program. In recent years, we've seen a reduction in the number of students enrolled in the District 67 Mandarin program. At the same time, we are seeing a growing desire for increased minutes in other areas, including math, reading, SEL, and recess. With this in mind, this fall, we will reduce daily Mandarin study from 60 to 30 minutes per day. At the elementary level, this means covering 5 units per year instead of 6. This shift will allow us to reallocate time to other important areas, but will also impact Mandarin progression, reducing proficiency by 1 level as students enter middle school and high school. For example, students will progress from elementary to the middle school at the novice mid versus the novice high level. Students entering high school will transition at the intermediate mid instead of intermediate high designation. For students who continue with Mandarin in high school, this will mean taking advanced placement Chinese in 10th grade. We conferred with staff, held a June 2nd online meeting for parents and guardians of Mandarin students. That meeting was also recorded and shared for those who could not attend. We have surveyed parents of K-3 Mandarin students twice. Of our 50 families participating in the program, we had 13 survey responses. Overall, parents who responded shared the interest of preserving the Mandarin program. 7 parents indicated a desire to retain more minutes for Mandarin. District 67 Mandarin program recommendation. And our recommendation is that we reduce the Mandarin program minutes for 21-22 school year, increase Mandarin program recruitment efforts, and reassess for the 22-23 school year. Medically necessitated remote learning. As we look ahead to the next school year, we are thrilled to plan for our return to full-day in-person learning. 5 days per week, all in every day, as Dr. Montgomery says. Recently, the Illinois State Board of Education provided direction regarding the availability of remote learning for public schools. Next fall, remote learning will no longer be an option for most Illinois public school students. With this shift, the option of remote learning will be the exception rather than the rule. According to ISBE's most recent guidelines, school districts are required to provide remote learning to students who meet both of the following conditions, are not eligible for the COVID-19 vaccine and are under a quarantine order by a local public health department or the Illinois Department of Public Health. Over the past few months, our administrative team worked with the high school, NSSED, CEDAL, and neighboring districts to explore potential options to meet these requirements. In May, we surveyed District 67 families to see how many students would potentially need a remote program for medical reasons, and the results listed 7 students for District 67. The administrative team is developing plans for 2 different scenarios. Long-term need, meaning students who need remote learning for medical reasons, and short-term need, meaning students who have to quarantine at a point during the school year. The week of July 6th, we will continue researching options and develop draft plans with our district and building administrators. We will also meet with LFEA leadership to hear their thoughts. We will have a draft of our plans to the board by July 15th. Communication with parents will follow shortly thereafter. My last item.
Hey, Connie, real quick question. The 7 students, were they just distributed across K through 8, or were they focused by chance to a couple grades?
I do not believe that they were focused. I know that Jeff did the survey for us. I don't believe that we know what grades the students were in.
Thanks.
My last item for tonight's report involves some very exciting news. Dr. Montgomery and I are prepared to make a recommendation to the board regarding the next principal of Cherokee Elementary School. Before I do that, on behalf of Dr. Montgomery, who has been closely involved in the search process, I would like to review the journey that brought us to this point. You see the timeline where we started May 27th with posting the position. Then a survey was sent to Cherokee parents, guardians, and staff, which was followed by stakeholder focus groups regarding the qualities that they're looking for in the ideal Cherokee principal. Then we had a slate of over 20 candidates, 22 to be exact, presented to the interim superintendent and the incoming superintendent. Stakeholder interviews took place, and then D67 board president and vice president met with the recommended candidate. As you may recall, we are working with the education leadership recruiting firm of BWP and Associates. Survey results. A survey was given to the parents, really saying, what is it that you're looking for in the next Cherokee principal. We had 180 participants, and you can see what they identified as being most important and the leadership characteristics that they valued in the next principal. Therefore, with all of this as a backdrop, and on behalf of incoming Lake Forest Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Matthew Montgomery, I am pleased to recommend to the District 67 Board of Education, Dr. Chad Prosen, as the next principal of Cherokee Elementary School. Dr. Prosen has nearly 25 years of education experience and has spent the last 18 years focused on servant and instructional leadership as a principal of pre-K through 5 and pre-K through 8 high-achieving learning communities in the Chicagoland area. Dr. Prosen holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in history from Baylor University, a master's degree in educational administration from St. Xavier University, and his doctorate in education, policy, organization, and leadership from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Dr. Prosen was a clear choice for Cherokee among the majority of our stakeholders. We want to thank our search firm, BWP & Associates, for their assistance in identifying such a strong slate of candidates. To our Assistant Superintendent, Rebecca Jennings, thank you for your steady leadership of this search process. And to our school community, thank you for your active engagement in bringing us to this point. Pending the board's approval, Dr. Prosen will join District 67 as the new principal of Cherokee Elementary School on July 1st. This concludes the interim superintendent's report.
Are there questions from the board for Connie? Seeing none, we'll move to our first opportunity for public comment. It looks like we may have some public comment tonight. So let me reiterate some of our guidelines for public comment. These guidelines are designed in order to maximize participation, both in terms of fairness and organization. After being recognized by the board president, interested speakers should state their name before addressing the board. Each person will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. Everybody has a right within reason to be heard respectfully. Members of the public will not be allowed to speak a second time until everybody in the audience who wants to speak has been allowed to do so. If you can, if somebody has made your point, if you could just please briefly mention that you support someone else's point as we go through the evening. And then to provide an accurate response, any detailed questions posed to the board or the administration will be listened to and taken under advisement. And as a reminder, public is always welcome to meet with the board or school officials to receive information, discuss ideas, or express concerns. And lastly, if the public has any letters or any other written materials, they may be submitted to the board clerk for public record. Julia, our board clerk, will be timing public participation and will advise you when you've reached your 3 minutes. Are there any members of the public who'd like to address the board tonight?
All right, hi everybody. My name is Erika Granado, and I have 3 kids in the district, 2 at the DPM and 1 at Everett Elementary. And I've been a resident of Lake Forest for the last 10 years. Thank you for allowing me to be here today, and thank you for your effort and commitment to putting our kids back in school all day, every day this coming fall. It is a big step in the right direction, but is not the last step we need to take for our children. Now that we are in fact committed to having the kids in all day, it is time to discuss the terms in which we do so. It is time to move on. No more mandatory masking, unnecessary testing, and quarantines. No more screeners, no more tents, no more 6 feet of distance, and kids sitting in opposite corners. It is time to acknowledge that children are not at high risk for contracting COVID, but if they do, are more likely to display symptoms of a common cold and more likely to recover having suffered no lasting effects. It is time to acknowledge that forcing kids to quarantine for up to 2 weeks without an option to receive proper education instruction is just yet another academic setback in a list of many. It is time to acknowledge that it is more damaging for our children to be masked all day, breathing in toxins and bacteria, far worse than they had not been masked at all. It is time to acknowledge that this vaccine is not FDA approved, is only approved for emergency use, and although it is available for ages 12 and up, there are many who will choose to refrain from doing so due to safety concerns for children. This is a choice that should be respected and not pushed upon. It is time to acknowledge that when you look at a map of the country, you'll see that many of our states are now starting to remove those mask mandates for everybody, including children, in the schools. It's time to acknowledge that asking our kids to wear a mask while indoors at school is a recommendation and not a law. And while we can acknowledge the recommendation, we cannot treat it as if it is more. Recognizing that you do not control the governor, state officials, ISB, and IDPH, you do have the power to speak up on behalf of the most important people in this story, the students of our local school district. It is time to ask why these recommendations keep extending. It is time to push back and say, no, we are not okay with this recommendation, and it's time to demand change. Other districts, superintendents, school boards, and other elected officials all over the state are beginning to find their voice, and we ask that you do the same. I know my time with you this evening is brief, so I want to spend a little bit more time focused on masks. Masks are dirty, contaminated, and seemingly keep in more bad germs than they're keeping out. Prolonged mask wearing causes headaches, sore throats, or worse, strep. Masks create anxiety and unnecessary barriers to communication, and in this case, learning. Masks create speech complications and subsequently listening issues, which also impact learning and comprehension. Masks make it nearly impossible to interpret expression and create barriers for those that struggle to find the words. Masks limit the ability to connect with others socially and emotionally in a world where kids struggle to connect outside of electronics and social media. We need to remove the barrier by removing the masks. When I think of the impacts the masks have had on our children, I think of this past yearbook as evidence. I look forward to going through the yearbook at the end of the year with my kids and talking with them about the pictures, their classmates, and all the activities that happened at school. You know what they say,
Thank
a
you
picture
so
is
much.
worth
3 minutes have elapsed.
a bit more. Yeah, almost done. Thank you. You know what they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words, but this year was different. I could not see the faces of these kids, just masks. It was hard to capture expression, the joy of being among friends, the surprise of the outcome of a science experiment, or the simple silliness of being a kid. Looking at the yearbook made me feel sad, and it made me feel even worse to imagine what our kids felt each and every day. When I think about what back to school should look like, again, it's no more tents or daily screeners, distancing requirements. Vaccine is a family choice, as it should be, and masks are optional and used at the discretion of the family. Advocate for the kids and put the choice back in the hands of the family where it belongs. In an effort to provide solutions, I would also add that I would be a strong advocate for signing a waiver that would remove any liability in exchange for eliminating these requirements in our schools. We, as the members of the community, and more importantly, the children you serve, would appreciate you stepping up and challenging the state and their recommendations. If you are already doing this, I applaud you, and if you're not, I ask you to step up and advocate for these children. Thanks so much, and thanks for letting me finish.
Thanks, Erika. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
Hi, my name is Allison Graf, and I have grown up in Lake Forest. I have 3 children. They are 20, 16, and 10. So college, high school, one will be a junior, and the other is a 5th grader at Lake Bluff Elementary. So I'm really here to represent the high school. I wanted to just lay out a few facts, because I think the problem right now with the community and with the Board of Education is a lack of knowing what laws are laws, what rules are rules, what mandates are actually accurate. There was an instance this spring with the senior graduation, and at first masks were going to be required outside. A lot of communication back and forth between a family member of mine and the administration, and he was told that the Lake County Health Department could shut down our school if we didn't mask outside. It took 20 minutes and one text to the Lake County Health Department to be told by Leah Bocci that they have no authority to shut down our school. So that was a quick way to address something that had been told that was incorrect. So I think what I would like to do right now is simply lay out some facts. I'm assuming most of you are cognizant of this already, but I think it's really important information for the general community, people who are listening and watching to know. On May 31st, Dr. Ngaze Ezike filed a letter dated May 17th, 2021, issuing an emergency repeal of Emergency Rule 690.50. There now exists no state law or regulation providing for enforcement of J.B. Pritzker's executive orders on masking and capacity limits on schools, businesses, or individuals. Masking at first was an issue about health, right? We now know that there's no scientific data that actually backs up that masks have been able to prevent the spread of COVID. Now that most people are, whoever chooses to be, is vaccinated, every person in the school who works in the school has the opportunity to be vaccinated. If the vaccines work, they shouldn't be concerned if other children are not wearing masks or they themselves are not vaccinated. The WHO just came out and recommended that children 18 and younger not be vaccinated right now. The point is this, it's a choice. Everybody has a choice. I'm not here to say you should or shouldn't do anything, but what I'm here to say is that we really need to be able to provide reasoning behind our choices and behind the recommendations for school and the policies that you guys have decided to follow. Quickly, I want to just address a couple of things in terms of a face mask law. There is currently no state law in Illinois enacted by the Illinois legislature or any administrative rule enacted that requires any individual, including students, to wear a medical device, otherwise generally known as a face mask, in order to prevent any illness, including but not limited to any contagious or infectious disease. There is no lawful authority, neither state nor federal, that has the ability to lawfully and legally require any individual in a private setting, in a public place, or within an individual's workplace or place of employment, or in a school classroom, or any school property, to require any individual to wear a medical device, otherwise generally known as a
Thank you
face
so
mask.
much. 3 minutes have elapsed.
Okay, so I could go on and on. What I really want to say, and I really want to implore you all, is when you are making decisions about what our children are going to be faced with going into school in the fall, I want you to really consider the science behind it and the legality. I know that we're in a litigious society, and a lot of this has to do with liability. And I'm asking you guys to step up, to be brave, and to not hide behind guidance, right? We use that word all the time. Guidance and recommendations. Those are not laws. Those are not laws. Those are not things that our children need to be a victim of, because we're not brave enough to step up and fight for what's right. So I beg of you guys to do the right thing. I know every single one of you is out and about this summer. We're in restaurants, we're in bars, we're in grocery stores. We are not wearing masks anymore. It would be ridiculous to send our children back into school and decide that they need to mask up so that we don't lose our funding, which will not happen, because it will not happen because of this.
I'll be quick because they've covered everything very well. So I'm Lori Fitzgerald. I have 3 children across District 115 and District 67. I just want to reiterate that ISB guidelines are just that. They're guidelines, and I would respectfully ask the board that you not be a political mouthpiece, and that we follow the science and do what's best for our children. There are a handful of schools in Illinois who have already stated that masks will be optional. In fact, I will email you the website. There's a school in Elmhurst, Illinois. If you look at their website under the question, are masks optional for the 21-22 school year? They say yes, that is the plan. We have consistently reported this since March of 2021. All staff, students, and parents, whether wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, will equally be a part of the team with dignity and respect. They also say many states, districts, and schools, including those directly bordering Illinois, have already announced mask optional policies. They've been in communication with schools in other states that have been mask optional for quite some time, and even some who have been mask optional all year last year, and they've all experienced success. It says we have a few teachers at a higher risk due to health issues. The school supports these teachers and will require students to wear a mask in those respective classrooms only. They're asking everyone in the community to support this 100%. So I'll email, the board this example of this school that has put together, this policy, and just respectfully ask, again, that we do what's right for our students. Thank you.
My name is Jamie Crouch. I have 3 young sons. I have, my oldest son is going to be entering kindergarten at Cherokee. So I am here today as a parent of an incoming kindergartner, a former public educator, and a former union representative. Many people have said what I'm here to say, so I will keep it brief. But I'm here, to talk about masks. At this point, the guidance from the CDC is using the word that recommends masking of any unvaccinated individuals. Adults are allowed to assess their own risk. Parents should be allowed to assess the risk of their own children. The metrics of the state are as low as they've been since March 2020. States around us do not have mask mandates in school, and the CDC guidance is the same in Illinois as it is in those other states. Districts around us are having, large districts around us are having these conversations about masks. Children across Lake Forest and the state of Illinois are currently spending their summers unmasked at camps, playing organized sports, at playgrounds, beaches, restaurants, stores, traveling. In our own town, they will be attending carnivals, parades, and concerts. They will be going to Wrigley Field, where there are 40,000 other people that are unmasked. Children have been able to resume their normal lives everywhere except for school. So the time is now to be ready for the next step. My sons are currently attending a Park District camp at Everett Elementary School, where masks are 100% optional, both indoor and outdoor. Some parents have chosen for their children to wear masks. Most do not wear masks. The kids are happy, meeting new people, having fun, and most notably, they are healthy. This is occurring at a local school setting. We aim to educate without boundaries so students can learn without limits. Please stop waiting for the political fight to ebb and the bureaucracy to tell you when it's okay. It's time to be the district that we say we are and create this environment where we feel that children can be inspired and empowered to develop a balanced sense of self, steadfast resiliency, and deep respect for others. Please fight for the rights of our children. 67 was one of the only districts in this area, in the state, in the nation, to not return to full-day in-person learning last year. Let's be the leaders this time. That's all I have.
Hi, my name is Colleen Gustafson. I'm a resident of Lake Forest. I moved here about 4 years ago. And I have four beautiful young daughters. My oldest, she will be starting kindergarten at Cherokee this year. And since she started preschool when she was 2, loves school. So the thought of her potentially not liking school because of mask restrictions that may be in place still break my heart. But anyways, I'm standing here to really beg you to get rid of these masks for the kids. It's unnecessary at this point and honestly does cause way more harm to them both physically and emotionally. Even, Anthony Fauci says they're not doing anything. So let's follow the science. As we are educators, follow the science and get rid of them, please. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for coming on, speaking, and sharing your thoughts with the board tonight. We'll now move to our next agenda item, which are a couple of reports. The first of these reports will be an update from the administration on the CSCI, which is an emotional wellness report and survey from this year. Michelle?
All right, so I provided some more detail in the board packet just to give you some background information. I know we have some new board members or may not know a little bit about the CSCI, and they said you have 5 minutes to talk, so I didn't think I could cover everything. But the CSCI is the comprehensive school climate inventory that is administered. We've been using it since 2015 in District 67. Every year, staff and students are given the assessment, and every other year we assess the parents. The reason we do that is because District 115 also uses the CSCI, and we don't want parents to be answering 2 surveys every year, so we alternate that every year. So this year was not a parent survey year. ISB does require schools to have a measure in place, and many of our districts around us use the 5 essentials, or we have an option to select one of 2 approved alternate surveys, the Cognia or the CSCI. So we have chosen to use the CSCI since we were required to use a survey. The survey is developed by the National Schools Climate Center. There are approximately 72 questions. A Likert scale is used, 1 being the lowest, 4 or 5 being the highest. And the scores are clustered among various dimensions of the school climate that you can see here. Okay. So I'm going to hit some key things. One of the indicators that we've looked at every year is just participation rates, and the CSCI as well as the district really looks at that 90% participation rate. We have gone back. I didn't include all of the years because it made the charts really full with numbers, so I just went back a few years. But in 2019, both of our groups, the students and the staff, met the 90% participation rate, and this year they were a little bit over this year in 2021. We barely made it over 90%, which, given all of the things we dealt with COVID, that was pretty impressive. 25% participation by parents is usually considered pretty good. We would love to see that number go up next year when we include the parents in our survey. So we met the participation rates this year for staff and students. So across the dimensions, students and teachers, I clustered, these are the student ratings from 2018. If you can see the colors, the green is this year. The CSCI considers a score that is above 3.5 to be in the positive range, scores between 2.5 and 3.5 in the neutral range, and then below 2.5 in the negative range. One of the very interesting things about this that Jeff and I looked at the numbers over and over again last week was, for the first time, we are over 3.5 in every single category. That includes social media, which has hovered just below that 3.5 range for the last few years, and the sense of social emotional security. So we are above in all of the categories this year relative to previous years through 2021, all in the positive range. Staff ratings, similar pattern. The staff include a few more questions than our students do. Social inclusion was one of those measures that was new this year, so this is our first year of baseline with that particular dimension. And then leadership and professional development. Staff provide feedback about those items for their schools. Again, sense of social emotional security above 3.5, and our social media above as well. So we had similar patterns across staff and students with respect to our ratings being overwhelmingly higher this year than we've had in previous years. And our parent ratings, we did not survey parents this year, but I did include the 3 years worth of data that we have had. You can see that social media for parents is also an area that tends to be rated lower relative to others. I don't consider a score of 3.4 to be low, but it is relative to our other ratings. And sense of social emotional security, the last time we surveyed, had crept up over that 3.5 rating. So we're starting to see some of those trends shift a little bit, and we'll see if that continues into next year. So highlights, the median ratings in social media and social emotional security were all in the positive range for the first time since the CSCI has been administered. In addition to the positive change in median ratings in these two areas, all but 2 median ratings across all dimensions for both students and staff were equal to or higher than previous years. The median student rating for physical surroundings was lower than previous years, and the median staff rating for school connectedness or engagement was slightly lower than 2020, which is very interesting because we had significant changes to both our physical presence in school this year as well as our connectedness. So the interesting thing is, through COVID, our CSCI ratings look better than they ever have. Questions?
Yeah, Michelle, that was going to be my question. You kind of led into it. So, on one hand, you look at this data and we should feel really good about what's going on in the district. On the other hand, it just seems so counterintuitive. So, how do you and the rest of the team think about? I mean, this year was an absolutely brutal year, and yet the survey and data around the social and emotional health of our students has increased across every dimension. How do you square that? How do you think about that?
Well, I think, in looking through all of this when school is out, I did talk with Dr. McHugh a little bit last week about some things. I think 2 things really stand out. When you remove movement in buildings and that congregation and all of the social things kids do, we've seen very little behavioral issues in schools this year. We've removed some of those opportunities, I think, with kids where those settings tend to be aggravated a little bit more. So when you're coming into a building and you're going to a classroom and that's where you stay for the most part other than recess and go home, I think the restricted movement for sure definitely played an impact in that. The interesting thing with social media, I would have expected that to have maybe even been more challenging, but the ratings in that area also spiked. So that's my best guess at this point. I think we will use these data with our school administrators to take a look at digging deeper into some of the subgroups and grades and see if we can identify some patterns that we'll use for school improvement planning.
Got it. And do we have any comparative data from any of our benchmark districts? I mean, maybe not yet because this is fresh, but just to see if other districts have experienced directionally the same movement that we have, or are we an outlier here?
I would have to, I don't know. Many school districts use the 5 essentials. That seems to be the more popular choice, so I would have to kind of do a little bit of checking to find out which of our neighboring communities do use the CSCI. But I could do that, certainly. So the 4th to 5th, the 5th graders that just completed this year? Okay. Okay. Right. So. Okay. Yeah. The interesting thing too, I don't have those data here, but I did put it in the board packet. We did survey the ABA schools separately than our in-person hybrid students, and so I wanted you to see the patterns across the grade levels, and the different settings were equally, they were equitable. We did not see dramatic differences between the two settings with that. So I will look for that. I could call that information for you, Mr. Chen.
I was actually going to just add, Michelle, to Rich's point. In the past, I think we've gotten a chance to just put eyes on the full report, where we can see some of the subgrouping and things like that, to just look over it. So maybe if we could just look at it, that would be great. Usually that's been something that's been in our board packet.
So this year, and
or did it come in a different form that's like unmanageable?
So they changed their platform for reporting that does not produce a district report. So I have to take the information and pull it together. So I do have school level data, but I do not have a full district report like we have had in the past. And I have voiced my displeasure after many hours of putting together the data in that option. So I will voice it again. And I'm happy to, I'll talk to Rebecca and Matt to see how we want to share out the reports.
Or just whatever you all use. Like when you look at it as teams, if you know, once we're back, you could share the way that you look at it as teams or something like that.
Sure, okay.
Yeah.
Each school gets a report, so the schools use it in their buildings, but so we would have to pull all of them together. But I think we can work on some way to get you at least a copy of the newer report. They don't answer, the other thing they don't give us this year is the actual questions and the items per question. They cluster them together, so it's a little bit trickier this year to try to drill down a little bit deeper than we have in the past.
On the social emotional point, I think your hypothesis is probably right, that that rating is up because of the different structure and the lack of movement, and that, you know, during school tours, I heard that from teachers. And I just hope that we, as a district, continue to really look at that number, because we shouldn't lose that. I mean, I know that we're going to go back to normal, hopefully next year, but that seems to be an important gain that we should really be focusing on.
I agree, and I think when we had our focus groups in the spring to talk about returning and what to keep and what went well and things that we wanted to preserve, that I think was a loud and clear recommendation, and we see that here as well, I think, with the survey data.
So typically it's board member questions for the admin, but I know you're eager and I know it's going to be an awesome question. So there's one small exception.
And it can't be
allow
about
that?
masks, because the
Okay.
minute I can send the email that says all in every day, no masks, I'm going to do it. So I just want, no, go ahead. It's electronic, so the kids complete the survey electronically. They start in grade 3. With the elementary kids in third grade, they do read the questions, so if there's are any issues with that, but it's all electronic. So we give the schools the link to access it, and that's all we do on our end. Everything goes into those National Center for.
I'm sorry.
Yep, there's a link that's given.
So I'm sorry, I know there may be some good questions. I just encourage everybody to follow up with Michelle after this. So, or maybe not immediately after this, but
Thanks, Justin.
shoot Michelle Shin
I am
an
going on
email.
vacation for 3 years. Good luck
Yes.
finding me. No, thank you.
She is passionate on this topic, and she can address your questions.
No,
But I do
I'm
want to
happy
keep moving with the rest of the board agenda. Thank you, Michelle.
All right, any other board questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Jen, I believe you're going to give a report on the post-issuance tax compliance report.
It's not really an official report, but it does need to be listed as a report so that the board recognizes and understands that we are following all of the rules and regulations and reporting requirements around our debt service extension bonds.
Thank you, Jen. Just for the community members here, the district authorized a debt obligation last month or 2 months ago, and so this is just a mandated state requirement that we need to read that into record. With that, we'll move to the next part of our agenda, which is board committee reports. Suzanne, do you have an education committee update for this month?
There was no education committee meeting.
Thank you. Alice, do you have an update on finance and ops?
Oops, I'm sorry. I do. Sorry, I got to get used to the microphone again. 1 minute. Sorry, it doesn't like my touch. The Finance and Operations Committee met on Wednesday, June 16th. It's the first time we met as a new board year. It included myself, Carl Carrar, and Richard Chung. In addition, Dr. Montgomery joined us by phone, Jen Hermes joined us, Tiffany, Katie, and Kathy Hughes. We're happy to let everyone know that we have new community members on the Finance and Operations Committee for the coming years. Steve Suri, Irene Okada, Lori Lambropoulos, and Kate Zimlich. Sorry, I have to practice some of those last names. During our meeting, we went through an agenda, talked about the charter. Jen provided an operation and finance orientation for us. We discussed briefly the budget, the auditing process, the 5-year projection, fund balance, CPI, operations, particularly food service, transportation, and fees, and future meetings, which are all in the board agenda and packet if you'd like to read further. Our next meeting is July. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. Any questions from the board for Alice? Seeing none. Rich, do you have an update on policy?
Are you using your mic?
Can you hear me now? Yes, okay, so policy committee meeting, this is great stuff. The first policy committee meeting follows usually a recommendation of policy from the state. We did not have one, so I thought this was going to be an easy week. But then we had an emergency board meeting. So an emergency joint Board of Education policy meeting, which I've never done before, was held on June 4th. But it was a serious topic. So this was brought to the attention of both boards by attorneys at Forensic and is being adopted as part of District 115's Rebecca Weidinger's report on the sexual misconduct allegations by a former teacher there. So 67 participated to mirror policies on both boards. We reviewed additions to 2 policies that would affect both districts. 590 addressed abused and neglected child reporting, and 720 harassment of students prohibited. There's a reference to 720 that needs to be made in section 5:125. Basically, for the public, we have included the act of grooming. grooming was added and cross-referenced to the policy numbers above. If those who do not know what grooming is, from an ISBA definition, grooming can be described as a deliberate process by which offenders gradually initiate, maintain sexual relationship with victims in secrecy. Grooming allows offenders to slowly overcome natural boundaries long before sexual abuse occurs. I have asked them to expand that policy because some of this grooming does not happen just in secrecy. Teachers or staff or whomever for the district employee can develop relationships with parents as well, so that they develop the trust to groom children into their care. So we will have a first reading that's going to be in your board packets. It is a tentative draft, which does not have all the full definition that we are looking for. And then we will have a firm final draft for you at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Question for Rich right now? Seeing none. We'll move to liaison reports. Suzanne, do you have an update on NSSED?
I do. The most exciting news, so hopefully you were able to review all the details because it was a pretty long report this time in your board packets, but I'll highlight a few things. First of all, very exciting is that on Thursday, July 1st, the cooperative will begin using its new name, True North Educational Cooperative 804. And that's a very exciting shift for the cooperative. We also, at our last meeting on June 9th, 2021, gave final approval to the budget, which allows all of the member districts to do their budgeting and planning in appropriate sequence. So NSSED or True North stays ahead of the budgeting process that way. And even though the cooperative had a lot of financial challenges this year due to significant shortfalls in enrollment due to COVID, as well as COVID costs, that they did not get any apportionments of any of the federal money for that. They were able to put together a balanced budget for next year and to reduce all of the cost issues and expense issues as much as possible this year. So that was great work. We are getting a new CSBO, and so he is now on board as of Thursday, which will be great. And we will be working on some strategic planning. I know we were talking about strategic planning earlier this evening, and NSSED or True North strategic plan is wrapping up, but we are going to spend the first 6 months finishing up some work that got slowed down due to the pandemic, and then doing some new strategic planning in the spring, hopefully. I think that is all I needed to highlight for tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Suzanne? No question, comment. I look forward to True North updates in the future. That will be easier for me to say. Carl, do you have an update on legislative actions?
Yes, I do. Run through this real quick. The whole report's within the packet there, so please encourage everybody to take a read on that. I did meet with Ed Red this week to explore some additional outreach and interaction between our district and Ed Red and the committees that they're starting up. They're looking to start up their meetings and committees this fall, so it's a little later than maybe we would have hoped for, but we'll keep pressing forward. IASB is collecting resolution submittals for Board of Educations across the state. Unfortunately, they were due last week, which doesn't really help us out too much, but I have met with District 115, and we're planning on getting a meeting together with District 65 and Ed Red, so we can kind of collaborate across all the districts to take whatever we want for legislation and where we're going to press for resolutions moving up at the state level, that we can work together to do that. Last item I have on here is just I took the phrasing from the governor that he recently put out there, where the state is into phase 5 of recovery. You can read the full thing there, but he has the whole statement on there. But really the couple things that was talked about very specifically was schools and the masking and being required, and social distancing still being required for the state, the schools to a maximum extent. So this is a discussion point that we could work as a board to bring something forward if we want to move down that path, but I think that's worth further discussion either at the next workshop or maybe you can put something together possibly. But I do know that I'm personally following this very closely, as many in the community, and I know the administration is following it extremely closely, including every single day that the papers come out. So that's it. Please go in there. The number of resolutions that the state has passed has been just astronomical. So please get in there and take a look at it. It's a great summary that IASB put together, and I really highly encourage everybody to take a look at that. Bye.
Thank you, Carl. Any question from the board for Carl? Seeing none. Rich, can you give an update on the Spirit?
Yeah, we just switched from PCs to iPads, so we're getting used to this. Spirit of 67 report. The Spirit Board is busy this summer planning outdoor spaces. The 17th annual home tour fundraiser that will take place on September 30th. It will feature 6 beautiful homes. Invitations will go out in August, and tickets will be purchased on the Spirit website. The Spirit looks forward to welcoming Dr. Matthew Montgomery as an honorary director to the board at our board September meeting on September 14th. This is a friendly reminder to make your annual donation to the Spirit when registering your kids for school. Participation is key, especially if you're at Sheridan. Thank you to our 67 community for graciously supporting the Spirit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rich. And as always, thank you to the Spirit for everything that they do for the community. We'll now move to our second opportunity for public participation. Are there members of the public who didn't get a chance to speak the last time who would like to address the board now? Yeah.
My name is Julie Halpern, and I have 3 kids at DPM, and I would first like to just express my support for those who have already spoken tonight. I wholeheartedly agree with everything they've said. I also hope that in the coming school year, kids are allowed to move about freely and that we don't focus on or micro-focus on keeping the distance between them. As far as Dr. Shin's report went, I think I understood what she was talking about. I will tell you, it did not gel at all with the experience my 3 kids had. I am curious as to what she meant by social media. I was definitely very taken aback this school year by the fact that kids at DPM were allowed to use cell phones. I have written to many of you about that, and I hope that that is not the case in the coming year. Like I said, I don't know for sure that's what you meant by social media, Dr. Shin, but it was not beneficial to students at all. And I think they do need to move around freely. I think this is part of being a kid and learning to be an adult and how to conduct yourself in a hallway when moving around and all of that that comes with greeting friends in a hallway. And I think that's all very important. So if I heard the earlier report correctly, that maybe staying in, a strict location created some sort of social well-being for kids, I disagree with that at all. My kids felt isolated, not just from wearing a mask, but from the physical constraints also, and using a phone at school on many levels was just wrong, and I can't believe it was allowed, and I am embarrassed by it, and I hope it does not continue in the coming school year. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Hi, my name is Erika Vernon, and I agree with everything that's been said tonight too, and I really appreciate all of the words that have been said. I'm a Lake Forest resident, but I'm not yet a parent, but I'm here standing up for my future kids. And I live over by the high school, and I've watched the kids all year running around with masks outside. And I have a master's in nutrition and integrative health, and I know how to read studies. I've read all the studies on masks that I can possibly find. And so I want to just make sure that we all are super clear that this is how we feel and we don't want our kids to wear masks, but it's also supported by all of the science. I mean, we have decades of randomized control trials that are the gold standard of science that tell us that there is no statistically significant benefit of wearing masks against viruses. The only studies showing that there may be some benefit to masking are simulation studies that are literally using mannequins or models or theories about how droplets or aerosols may spread. But there is no indication in real-life epidemiological studies that masks are effective whatsoever. And I'll give a couple of examples. So the CDC's very own mask study confirms this exact thing, stating that, quote, mask mandates were associated with a 0.5 percentage point decrease in daily COVID-19 case growth rates and a 0.7 percentage point decrease in daily COVID-19 death growth rates, unquote. The study also completely ignored other measures like hand washing that may have been responsible for that slight decrease in cases and deaths rather than masking. Furthermore, an analysis by the CDC found that 85% of people infected with COVID reported wearing a mask always or often. These are not convincing numbers for continuing to mask children. And not only are masks ineffective against viruses, they are also harmful to our health. There was a great meta-analysis of 65 different studies that came out in the last couple of months from the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health that reveals many health concerns related to masking, and I'll just name a few. Self-contamination from rebreathing air for hours at a time, increased risk of bacterial pneumonia, increased breathing resistance, increased blood pressure, lower oxygen to the body and brain, increased heart rate, decrease in cardiopulmonary capacity, impaired skin barrier function with acne, itching, and skin lesions, headache, and dizziness. So when we look at the data and we really read the studies, and I'm happy to email out any if anyone's interested in further reading the studies, and then we hear the lived experiences of the people in this room and their children, it's clear that forcing children to wear masks is wrong. So what the IDPH is recommending is wrong, and it's harmful. And I really hope that rather than just hiding behind whatever their guidance is, that you really choose to speak up now for our kids, because this is the only chance we have. No one else can stand up for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Erika. All right, we will now move to our action items this evening. Our first action item is approval of the Cherokee Principal Contract. May I have a motion to approve the Cherokee Principal Contract?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Are there any questions from the board on the contract at this time? Great. Given that we have a number of parents who are here this evening, we reviewed and discussed this extensively in executive session earlier tonight. So with that, may I have a roll call vote, please, Julia?
Mr. England?
Aye.
Mrs. Bernal?
Aye.
Mr. Chun? Ms. Helms?
Aye.
Mr. Carrar?
Aye.
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Mrs. Levert?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Julia. May I have a motion to approve the 2020-2021 final calendar?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Are there any questions about the calendar? Seeing none, Julia, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Carrar?
Aye.
Ms. Helms?
Aye.
Mrs. Levert?
Aye.
Mr. Chun? Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Mr. England?
Aye.
Mrs. Bernal?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Julia. May I have a motion to approve the first reading of updated policy 7-20?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Are there any questions about this policy? Rich spoke about it briefly. Seeing no questions, may I have a roll call vote, please, Julia?
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Mrs. Bernal?
Aye.
Ms. Helms?
Aye.
Mr. Chun? Mrs. Levert?
Aye.
Mr. England?
Aye.
Mr. Carrar?
Aye.
Motion carries.
May I have a motion to approve the first reading of updated policy 5-90?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Are there any questions for Rich on this policy update? May I have a roll call vote, please, Julia?
Mr. England?
Aye.
Mrs. Levert?
Aye.
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Ms. Helms?
Aye.
Mrs. Bernal?
Aye.
Mr. Chun? Mr. Carrar?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Julia. May I have a motion to approve the resolution to recall a licensed teacher?
So moved.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Are there any questions regarding this action item?
I got one question for Connie. Is this focused on an individual teacher or collectively?
One teacher.
All right, thank you.
May I have a roll call vote, please, Julia?
Mrs. Levert?
Aye.
Mrs. Bernal?
Aye.
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Ms. Helms?
Aye.
Mr. Carrar?
Aye.
Mr. Chun? Mr. England?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the Human Resources Report as presented?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Are there any questions about items in the HR report? Seeing none, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Ms. Helms?
Aye.
Mrs. Levert?
Aye.
Mr. England?
Aye.
Mr. Carrar?
Aye.
Mr. Chun? Mrs. Bernal?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Julia. We'll now move to our consent agenda. As a reminder, any item may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of a board member. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items, including adoption of a resolution for budget transfers, adoption of a resolution to abate working cash fund, approval of appointment of a treasurer, approval of a CLIC workers' compensation contract renewal, approval of CLIC liability insurance contract renewal, approval of disbursements, payrolls, and financial statements from April 2021, minutes of a regular meeting and workshop, May 25th, 2021, minutes of an executive session, May 25th, 2021.
So moved.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Are there any board members who'd like to request an item be removed or questions on any of these items? Seeing none, may I have a roll call vote, please, Julie?
Ms. Helms?
Aye.
Mrs. Bernal?
Aye.
Mr. Chun? Mrs. Levert?
Aye.
Mr. England?
Aye.
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Mr. Carrar?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Julia. We'll now move to Freedom of Information Act requests. We have one from Kathy Blahunka, status is complete. Announcements that are coming up. On Tuesday, July 6th, we'll have a joint District 67, District 115 Board of Education special meeting at 7 p.m. here at the West Campus Boardroom. On Wednesday, July 14th, 2021, we'll also have a joint District 67, District 115 Board of Education special meeting here in the West Campus room. And then on August 24th, Tuesday, August 24th, 2021, it will be our next regular District 67 Board of Education meeting, also here in this boardroom. May I have a motion to adjourn the Lake Forest School District 67 Board meeting for June 29th, 2021?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
May I have a voice vote? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Great. Before adjourning the meeting, I just want to thank all the members of the community who came out to express their points of view tonight. Thank you all.